Hey there, welcome to Bandit's Keep. I'm Daniel. Today we're going to talk about clerics, OSR type clerics, or specifically BX Dungeons and Dragons, which is more or less where a lot of the OSR kind of retro clones get their meat from, anyways. I think that much like demi-humans, which I'm going to talk about in another video, since it seems like I'm going through all the classes, I think that clerics are often played in a less interesting fashion than they could be. Now, I don't really play clerics so much, so maybe I should play them more, right? So if I have so much to say, but I'm just gonna talk a little bit about clerics and maybe what you could do to make the cleric more interesting, in your games. I think I see clerics a couple of different ways. So when I first started playing D&D, I was like 9, 10 years old, and we played with our friends. I can't remember anybody ever playing a cleric. I know it sounds weird probably to people who are new players and they're like, really? We just didn't see wanting to play a holy warrior, which is what a cleric is, right? We didn't think of them as heal bots, as they say now. Because first of all, you didn't get a whole lot of spells in the early editions of games, so it's not like they were healing that much anyways. We generally played characters because we thought they were cool, not because of powers, because I guess we were kids and we didn't really care. Like I always played the thief, and I talk about that in the other video. The thief is, by far one of the classes in the OSR BX game. People always talking about how it's crappy. It was my favorite class. I played it all the time. So we really didn't have a lot of clerics. I can't speak a lot about what we did when we were kids, except for when I used them as a DM. I used, like a lot of early D&D, the imagery of clerics is very kind of Christian, I guess. Of course, I didn't really understand or know that when I was a kid, and that was my background anyway, so just kind of, that's what I saw religion as anyways as a kid. So you've got that going for you, right? But what you also have to consider is that a cleric is this like holy warrior, right? They are gifted with basically two major abilities. So they're fighters, right? Of course, they're not as great a fighter as the fighter. But if you're looking at BX, fighters have a D8 hit point. A cleric is a D6. I mean, that's really not that big of a difference, especially considering that clerics also level up faster. Yes, they are limited on weapons. They can't use edged weapons, which means that they're pretty limited, especially on magic weapons when they start to find them. But a mace does a D6 damage, so it's not like it's a big deal. I mean, a D6 versus a D8, it's not the end of the world. Fighter-wise, they're definitely a weaker fighter than a fighter, right? Much like an elf is a weaker fighter than a fighter in the sense that an elf has a D6 hit points, though they can use any weapon. The cleric can wear the armor, though, and especially in old school games, you do not want to get hit, right? So wearing that plate armor is big, right? So a cleric is basically like a fighter, right? But if you break down their skill set, let's say, let's do this. I'm going to show you the BX book over here. I got it up on my screen. You should be looking at it now. Let me just make sure. Yep. Okay. All right. So clerics are humans who have dedicated themselves to the service of a god or goddess. They are trained in fighting and casting spells. As a cleric advances levels, he is granted use of more and more spells. However, these clerics do not receive any spells until they reach second level and have proven their devotion to their god or goddess. Okay, this is important, right? This to me is the key to the class, right? They don't start with spells. Not because, balance or whatever, like how people try to analyze games now. In the fiction of the world, they don't start with spells because they have to prove their devotion to their god or goddess, right? So that doesn't mean run around a dungeon smacking stuff, taking its gold until you have enough gold, until you have enough experience points, then go get a spell and run around and heal your party. That's not what a cleric's job is. That's not at all what a cleric is. Yes, they can do that, right? But really, they are devout and they are religious, right? So whatever their religion might be, we when we did use religion back in the day, we often did a lot of the Greek stuff. Like I was big on, my friend group was big on reading that stuff. So Zeus and Romans and Poseidon and all the mix of the two together. So those are always what we used. Occasionally some Norse stuff like Odin, but anyways, yeah, I think D&D makes you mix things up a lot because that's kind of how we did it. But anyways, if we look at the at the cleric, they need to be devout, right? So if you're going to play a cleric and make them interesting, right, instead of just being a weak fighter that eventually can heal people, they should be devoted in their beliefs. Now, I'm in favor of, in OSR type games like this one, not having this huge pantheon of gods. Like, a lot of times when I have players, they'll like throw out some god that they maybe knew about from second edition or from fifth edition or whatever, and that's fine. I don't care, especially if it's a one shot or whatever. But if I'm making a campaign, I like to keep things relatively vague, because I want people to be able to focus on the fact that they might be like, well, I want to worship this god that has these beliefs, and my character's going to really, but justice and this and that. And you could either take one of the regular pantheon gods that are like that, or you could create your own. It doesn't really matter. I don't get into the nitty gritty of the religion. It's not something I really get into, even if you're a cleric. Although, if you are a cleric and you want to do that, that will get you brownie points with me, right? Because me as the DM, I don't take the time to do it, because I talk about this in a lot of videos. I like to give players power. I like to give them some liberty to create for their character. So if I sit down and make a whole bunch of gods and I'm like, pick one, it's a little bit more challenging in my mind for them to really get exactly what they want. I mean, I could be wrong there. Maybe players want me to do that. Players, do you want me to make gods? I know in the Hyperborea campaign, for instance, there's gods there already, of course. But usually I'm playing a BX campaign. Actually, if you ever play an almost subsurface environment, their gods are basically satellites. They're like floating in space, which is really cool. So I mean, but even then, they only list a couple, and then they allow the players to make up their own, and that's exactly what I did when we had clerics. And Russia had an awesome one. It was an old Russian military satellite, and it was very cool. Like he did the sickle and the hammer. So, anyways, this allows players to be creative. But I think what's important here is that they embrace the beliefs of that god, and they play that out. That's what's going to make your cleric interesting. In fact, if you look at the example of combat, actually, when Morgan Ironwolf wants to go against her word and kill the hobgoblin, I think it is, prisoner, the cleric, Sister Rebecca, is like, my god won't want me to heal you, or my god might not heal somebody, I can't remember who says, who does something like that, because I gave my word. That's a cleric to me, right? Not that you should be jerky. In fact, I've even heard of people like I think in like second and third edition where clerics would be like, "Yeah, I charge the party to heal them." What? Like, that's so weird to me. No, you want people to be devout, right? You want them to believe and worship your god. That's ultimately what you want, right? You might not force it down their throat, but you might be like, well, listen, we're adventuring here, and my god has granted you, these healings, or purified your food when we were lost in the desert. Come aboard. It's like the cleric should be religious, right? They should be asking people to join their religion. They should be doing that. And again, it doesn't have to be aggravating. It just can be something that they do. It's something that the cleric is about. That religion is the backstory, if you will, of the cleric, and that's something that a cleric player character should use a lot, right? They shouldn't accept, gifts from things that are against the religion that they're in. They should not want to heal people if they're against that the beliefs of their religion. They should definitely play that up, right? This is what, and you can go all the ways from, okay, you're not doing things that I really believe in, but I think you're a good person, so I'm going to grant you this gift of healing, hoping that you'll change your ways. Or you could be hardcore, like, no, you're evil, and I'm not going to heal you. And that then gives this power to the cleric. And I actually think, so a couple things here. We'll get to turning undead in a second, too. The idea that, this is kind of a little sidestep, but much going back to where I talk about where the example of playing, kind of learning and setting preferences, the fact that the cleric does not get a spell at first level means that a first level party will never have healing. Not until they've gone on at least one adventure, right? If you go on one adventure and you get a big haul, there's a chance the cleric might level up, or I guess a chance you might get a healing potion. So you're likely going to run like 2, maybe 3 adventures before there's a healing spell in play in your party at all. And even when there is, there'll probably be one. This is going to teach players to be careful, right? If you know that you can go into a combat and then take some kind of a rest or drink healing potions that you can just buy at the store for whatever, or you can just, whatever. You heal up overnight, fold back to hit points like you do in some of the more modern games. That will focus the play towards combat. Because people will not be afraid of combat because they know they can just heal back up. So this is where I think, again, the cleric not having those spells actually teaches you something, right? You could make the cleric some kind of a healer, if that's part of their religion, and maybe even do some kind of mundane healing. Like maybe if the cleric helps people tend to their wounds during downtime, they heal faster. Or maybe they have connections at temples, right, where they can get healing done for donations, of course, in between sessions. But all in all, like the cleric should feel devout. It's like if you have a cleric in your group, you should know there's a cleric in your group. I would say if you have a cleric, a thief, and a fighter, and they all walk into a tavern, a cleric, a thief, and a fighter walk into a tavern, you might not know that the fighter is a fighter or the thief is a thief by how they generally act, because they might just both be, drinking the ale and doing and they're adventurers, and maybe the fighter's a bit tougher, maybe not, right? But if a cleric walks in there, you're gonna know they're a cleric, right? That cleric should, even if their god is about getting drunk and carousing, then they should get drunk and carouse with religious zeal, I guess we were, with religious zeal. They should be zealots. What are the tenets of your religion? What does your God preach? What does your God believe that their cleric should do? And that's what they should be doing. That will make your cleric so much more interesting than just, oh, I can heal you. Oh, I'll use my spell for the day. I don't heal anymore. I'm just going to wander around, hit people with a mace. I'm basically a fighter. No, everything they encounter, it should be the god of blah, blah. I mean, it should come to the point of being, like, I remember, and again, I actually did play a cleric once. I played a cleric in Curse of Strahd in 5th edition, and she was, I decided she was going to be basically a child, like who found religion. And yeah, that's kind of how I played her. And I think at first the other players were a little bit like, oh God, really again? But by halfway through, like other players were introducing my character as, now I'm trying to blank on what she used to say. She's something like, I'm the beacon of the morning lord or something. I can't remember exactly what she said. And then other player characters would start introducing her like that because it became the thing that my cleric did, And that was something that made my cleric stand out. And yeah, she healed them, right? Because of course in 5th edition you have a lot more spells. She healed them, she did other stuff, but everything she did was about the religion. And she used light a lot because her god was the morning lord, right? So she was constantly using the light spell and really kind of making that part of her kind of repertoire, right? But that's really what you want to do, right? As a cleric, you want to stand out. It's like, and I'm going to say this when we go to the demi-humans next time, because I guess I'm going to do the demi-humans. Now I've just decided to do this. The worst thing in the world for me is when you have a party full of characters and you've got like elves and dwarves and halflings, and halfway through the adventure or halfway through the campaign, everybody just feels human, right? They feel like a human fighter. You don't, because at first maybe you're like, oh, my character's really short. But then after a while, people just stop doing it. And if you're going to be that person with the cleric, like do it up front and then don't do it, don't play a cleric, I mean, play a fighter. Or maybe a thief, right? You should, as a cleric, be a zealot. In fact, I think I've seen some OSR games where they change the name of cleric to zealot. And I like that. I like that a lot, right? It's like you should be a religious zealot. And one of the greatest powers that your god gives you is the ability to repel the undead. And that's actually, I guess I left it on the screen for a long time. The turning of undead in an OSR game is way more important than healing. Because there are tons of undead at low levels, and that's where you really need to get away, right? And a cleric being able to step up and blast away, a bunch of skeletons and make them run, or zombies, is such a powerful thing. It's just like the magic user doesn't seem very strong until they cast that sleep spell and save your butt, right? The cleric being able to turn undead is, there we go, on page B8, there's a cleric versus undead table. Oh, it's right there. Where is it? There we go. So you're looking at a first level cleric. This is a roll of 2d6. So more than half the time, you're going to turn skeletons. So if you have a cleric in your party and you encounter skeletons at first level cleric, more than half the time, a bunch of those skeletons are gone, right? A little bit less than half, maybe I don't know the exact percentage there. I guess that would be like 65% or something, 70% of the time that you won't be able to turn the zombies, but like 30% you will, and then it can become turning ghouls is next to impossible for first level, but it's still possible. And a ghoul is crazy deadly, so just having that small chance is huge. Second level, things get a little bit easier. They're automatically turning skeletons. Third level, they're automatically turning zombies, and this ghoul is half the time. So if you look at this, that's only 3,000 experience points to get them up to third level. By then, the most of the fighters are like on second, on their way to third. The elf isn't even on second level yet. So the fact that cleric levels up quickly and has the turn undead ability makes them super useful to the party. Much more useful, like I said, than the healing. And I think that if you are a cleric, and you're playing a cleric in BX type games, I would not feel compelled as a player to take the heal spell or the cure light wound spell every single time you go in there for that whole level, because you may find that other spells are way more useful, and you can heal people. Like if they get beat up in the dungeon, you guys run. You can then the next day heal people and make it go fast. In fact, that's usually a good solution. Let's just quickly go to their spells so we can even look at their spells. Like if we look at the cleric spells, one thing I love about this game is how few things are in it. You've got your cure light wounds, but you've got your light spell, which is really great because light in BX can blind, and a blinded creature cannot attack. So if you walk into a lair of an ogre, it sneaks up on you and you're not ready for it, your cleric can throw a light spell in its eye, and if it fails its saving throw, it cannot attack you. That was basically went from almost certainly a TPK to you just save the day, right? Purified food and water can be really interesting. Remove fear, I don't find to be super, super interesting in the beginning because, I'm not sure how often that'll come up. But things like protection from evil are good for obviously protecting yourself. But detect evil, detect magic, and light are such great spells for a cleric to have that I wouldn't necessarily take cure light wounds whenever I went out. At second level, I think I would probably allow for that. I'd say take cure light wounds and then one other thing. And that's just how I would build a cleric, if you will. I hate that term, but yeah, I think that the main thing I want to get across here is that the cleric is, for lack of a better word, a zealot, right? Or they should be. They are one of the few mortals that are gifted with the powers of the gods. Magic users, you need to research and learn spells, right? But a cleric is given those powers by the gods. They are given the power because of their religious devotion. That is why they have their powers. And this includes the turning undead. If they do not act accordingly, then they probably shouldn't have those powers. And I'm not that kind of DM that's like, you didn't act like a cleric, so I'm not going to take away your spells. But you could theoretically do that in a long campaign. Be like, listen, you're worshiping this god, and you are doing all these things that is completely against the tenets that we discussed at the beginning was your god's tenets. What's going on here? You need to change your ways. Maybe you got to go on a vision quest. So all that being said, I think a cleric's a great class, especially in OSR type games. They give you a good mix of abilities that allows you to be, and again, I hate this because I don't think it's true all the time, but it allows you to be useful all the time. They're generally, they're going to be the one that, like, if you encounter strange religious symbols, maybe they'll have a chance of knowing it. The DM can allow you to roll against your wisdom where you're in, right? They're going to be the ones that are going to be able to be in the front line fighting undead. They're going to be able to be in the front line anyways with their plate mail armor on, right? Even if they can only swing a mace. So a cleric is always going to be a good, useful character, forgetting about the spells. The spells are almost secondary to a cleric in a game like this. Until they level up a lot, then they can be quite devastating. But at a low-level game, your cleric is really there to be maybe intermediary at temples. They're there to maybe have some extra knowledge. They're there to be a good frontline defense. And they're there to fight the undead. So I recommend that if you don't usually play clerics, you give it a shot, because a cleric can be really fun to play. Try to play them more like a zealot. Let me know if you already do that. Is this how you play clerics? Or are you like, no, Daniel, you're crazy. That's not how you should play a cleric. A cleric should just be an elf or whatever. Who knows what you're going to say. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. How do you like clerics? What's the deal with clerics? And yeah, I think I'm gonna do the demi-humans because I feel like there's something to talk about there too. Let me know if that's something you're interested in seeing. If you're like, no, don't do that, that's terrible, then I probably won't. Or I might do it anyways. I kind of just talk about whatever I think is interesting. So, but I'll try to, talk about stuff that you guys think are interesting. If there's something you want me to expand on that I've said before, or something that you think you might be interested in my thoughts on, go ahead and leave a comment below. I'm also on Twitter now, Bandits Keeps. You can find me there and tweet at me, I guess. And I'll see you next time.